I love Harry Potter. I have since I was a kid, and when it comes to crafting, making plush toys is my favorite. So whenever I have the opportunity to combine the two, of course I'll jump at it. Today I'm going to show you guys how to make this super cute plush monster book of monsters as part of a collab with one of my favorite YouTube channels, sealemondiy. Jennifer of Sea Lemon makes beautiful video tutorials, and her bookbinding tutorials are especially great. So for her part of this Harry Potter collab, she'll show you how to make Tom Riddle's diary. Make sure to stick around after my tutorial for that. So to get started on these DIY books within the Harry Potter books, this is super meta. Here's how to make your own plush monster book of monsters. First, check the video description for a link to download the pattern PDF. Print it out and cut out all of the pattern pieces. Use the patterns to cut out pieces of felt in the colors marked on the pattern. You'll need 2 of each eye size in black felt, 1 forked tongue bookmark in red, 1 bigger page piece and 2 of the smaller page pieces in off-white, and 1 of each of the teeth pieces in white felt. Next, measure and cut out your book cover pieces on plastic canvas mesh, which I found in the embroidery section of a craft store. You'll need 2 4.5 by 6 inch pieces for the covers and a 2 by 6 inch piece for the spine. Those dimensions are also written on the pattern if you need them. Lay those pieces out on some fluffy brown fleece or similar fabric and cut around the whole shape, leaving some space to wrap the fabric around the edges. Take a piece of embroidery floss or pearl cotton and thread it onto an embroidery needle. You're going to use this to attach the spine to the covers, and it'll act like a set of hinges. Thread the floss through the mesh holes starting at one corner of the spine, and then thread it through the nearest corner of one cover piece. I went back to the spine and back through to the cover piece one more time before I tied a double knot and trimmed the ends, but you can do this however you want as long as it keeps the two attached and turns like door hinges. Repeat this on each corner of the spine and in the center of each edge so you have the spine attached to both covers and you can open and close it like a book. Place the mesh onto the wrong side of the fabric so the fuzzier side will be on the top. Now we're going to sew 4 felt eyes onto the cover fabric. Thread a needle with black thread and knot the end. Gently wrap the fabric around the side of the front cover and flip it so you can see the front. We'll be sewing this down later, but for now you just need to see where the edge will be so you can properly place the eyes like this. Whip stitch the felt eyes to the cover, starting underneath so the knot is hidden. If you need help learning any of these stitches, I will link to more detailed hand sewing tutorials in the video description. I decided to sew the eyes on through the plastic canvas mesh, even though it can be a little bit tough to sew through, so the fabric cover will start to be secured to the mesh. Otherwise, the eyes might slide forward when you stretch the fabric around the mesh later. When you need to switch to the next eye, you can either drag the extra thread across the back or knot it and start another piece of thread if you start to run out. Once all of the eyes are sewn on, tie some knots on the back side and trim the excess thread. Next, add highlights to the eyes using white embroidery floss and French knots. Thread your floss onto a needle, knot the end, and poke the needle up from the back in the spot where you want the highlight. Wrap your needle around the floss 1 or 2 times, then push it back down close to where it came up and slowly pull it tight. You may want to practice this if you're unfamiliar with French knots. Once you've added a highlight to each eye, tie a knot on the back and trim the excess. Now we're going to wrap the book cover in the brown fleece and sew it to the mesh to secure it. Thread a needle with brown thread and knot the end. Pinch your first corner so the fabric wraps around the side properly, then trim off most of the excess fleece. Using your thread, sew the corner shut. I did this by sewing as I pinched the corner. Also, try to grab the mesh with one of your stitches to keep it from moving around. You may have to bend the plastic a little bit. When you get to the end of the corner, flatten the extra fabric down and sew it in place. Don't worry if this is a little bit messy, since this side is going to be covered by the pages later and you won't see it. When you're done with your first corner, tie a knot and trim off your excess thread. Once your first corner is secure, flatten down the next side and secure that to the mesh with a few stitches, being careful not to poke through to the front side of the cover so you don't see your stitches later. So go all the way around, stitching the corners shut and securing both the corners and the sides to the plastic mesh. At each attachment point, make sure to double knot your thread so it won't come undone. When you've attached the whole fabric piece to the plastic canvas, your cover should look like this. Now we'll start making the pages by lightly sewing the felt teeth to the bigger off-white piece of felt. Position them in the center of your pages and make one stitch with white thread on the tip of each tooth and in each corner to secure it a little bit more. Once both pieces are lightly attached, tie a knot on the back and trim the excess thread. The two smaller off-white pieces will be the sides of the book pages, so we'll need to sew them on either side of our center page piece with the monster teeth. Starting with one side, knot your white thread and stack your mouth pages and one of the side pages like this so you can sew along the line where they meet. Start your whip stitches by putting the knot between the stacks so it doesn't stick out, then whip stitch along the edge, leaving these parallel stitches. When you're done, open the pieces and tie a knot on the inside so it will stay hidden. Now these two pieces will make a corner. Sew on the other page piece onto the opposite side of the pages with the teeth on them the same way so your pages look like this. The pages will go inside the cover just like this, and this plush is really starting to come together. Take a nice long piece of white thread and knot the end so you can sew the pages to the cover using whip stitch. Starting at a top corner, we'll sew across the top of the piece with the teeth, around the first side and along the spine, across the bottom of the teeth, and we'll leave the last side open temporarily so we can stuff it. Place the pages like this so they're centered and the edges of the cover will hang over them, then start sewing the pages to the fabric of the cover using whip stitch. This can be a little bit difficult because of the angles, but just keep adjusting the pages and turning the piece so you can see what's happening. Make sure with each stitch that you're grabbing both the felt pages and the fleece cover so it will attach securely. Be careful around the corners to make sure that they line up correctly. The spine can get a little bit tricky, but luckily the fleece is forgiving so you can pull it as you're sewing to make it work. If you run out of thread like I did, finish the stitch so your thread ends on the inside of the book and tie a new piece of thread to the end of it, 3 knots to be safe. Then thread the new piece onto your needle and continue sewing. Once you've reached the last side, stuff the plush lightly with polyester fiber fill. You don't want to push out the pages from the inside, but you do want it to feel like a plush toy. Then finish sewing it closed, pushing any loose fiber fill back inside. I ended up adding a little more stuffing once I had only an inch or 2 left to go. When you reach the corner where you started, tie a few knots using your first stitch as an anchor. To hide the excess thread, push your needle in near the knot and back out a little bit over from that spot. Pull your needle through, then trim the thread close to the plush. For the final touch, we'll sew on the forked tongue bookmark. Thread a needle with red thread and knot the end. Grab the red felt piece and start your first stitch from the underside of the top corner so your knot stays hidden. Place the bookmark onto the plush like this and whip stitch it on right where the pages meet the cover. Once you have sewn all the way across the top of the bookmark, lift it up and tie your knot underneath it so it's hidden. Hide the excess thread the same way you did before and trim it. And that is the finished Monster Book of Monsters plush. I really love the way mine came out, and I'll definitely be keeping him on my desk where I can see him while I work. He's super fuzzy, really cute, and he's just scary enough. Just remember to keep an eye on him in case he gets hungry. This is one of my absolute favorite plush projects I've made, so I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you make one yourself, definitely send me a picture of it on Twitter at Lauren Myrtle, because I would love to see how your monster book came out. Also, if you're interested in buying some of the other plush toys I make, definitely check out my Etsy shop, Fairweather Friends. I have a bunch of Harry Potter inspired items like snowy owls, Hogwarts house mascots, and even Hermione's otter Patronus. Visit fairweatherfriends.etsy.com to check them out. Be sure to watch Sea Lemon's video to learn to make Tom Riddle's diary. I really love her videos, and I think that you will too. Make sure to subscribe if you like what you see. Read the video description for links and details if you're interested. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon!